My name is Niklas Ambertsson. I'm a Senior Product Manager for Visual and Advanced Analytics in Spotfire. I'm joined today with my colleagues Thomas Blomberg and Miguel Cisneros, who are going to cover their parts of what's new in Spotfire 10.8. First, the standard disclaimer and confidentiality. So obviously we don't want you to talk in the wrong forums about these things that we present. To start off, Spotfire 10.8 is a mainstream release. That means that Spotfire 10.3 LTS is still the most recent long-term support release, and it's of course still under support as such. I predict that there is going to be a question about when is the next Spotfire LTS release coming. And you may be aware that we have shared the policy that we would try to have 12 to 18 months between the Spotfire LTS releases, and Spotfire 10.3 was released in May last year. So sometime after May to November, so is the plan for the Spotfire 10 for the next Spotfire LTS release, though it's not exactly decided at this point in time. So let's now talk about Spotfire 10.8. So this is a release with actually quite a lot of different features. So some are smaller, some are bigger, and all of them are useful for their specific use cases. So I'm going to cover visual analytics and advanced analytics. So you see here we have some nice features like customizable toolbar, more flexible drill down, and for the advanced analytics, Python tools. Then Thomas Blomberg is going to cover the data wrangling and data access, and Miguel Cisneros is going to cover the administration part of that, and then I'll return towards the end and do the few developer features that we have and conclude this presentation. But let's now start with the visual analytics features, and the first one I wanted to speak about is the customizable toolbar. So Spotfire 10, as you are probably aware, did not have the same kind of toolbar as was present in the Spotfire 7.x and earlier versions of Spotfire, where you have lots of different shortcuts to some of the features in the toolbar. So Spotfire 10 then has a much less busy and more modern look and feel, but of course, that comes at the expense of not being able to quickly access some of the features. So we thought about how can we actually solve this, that without having the toolbar so busy with different icons that it's hard to use for new users, how can we still make it as quick and fast for more experienced user and for super users as was the Spotfire 7 toolbar. So we decided to implement a customizable toolbar. This also was one of the most highly voted IDs on the ID portal for Spotfire 10. So that we are glad to solve this ID as well. So essentially it means that you are able to select different your favorite features and pin them to the toolbar. And I'm actually going to jump right into a little demo here. So here you see Spotfire 10, and if I now click in the toolbar, so it's a right click, then I can select to customize the toolbar. And what happens is that this flyout is expanding here, and I can select different features to add to the toolbar. So let's say that I want quick access to the table. Then I just click on the table, put it there. If I want to have details on demand toggle, I'll click on that. Actually, I don't just need to click. I can actually I can actually drag and drop it to the position. I can even put in a divider here. So let's put the divider at that place. And then I want my favorite data function properties as well. And yeah, let's say I'm good. So then I have my own 3 features here. If I click on the table icon, I get the table. If I click on the details on demand, I get the details on demand toggled. So you can see if I now mark something, I get to see that in the details on demand. If I click it again, then it toggles away. And if I click the data function properties, then I get to this dialog where I can actually register and insert new data functions. Actually, I typically would like also to have perhaps I would like to have the calculated column. So if I can't find it, I can search, and here is the add calculated columns, and I want that to be there. I can put other dividers in here if I want to create my own grouping of the features in the toolbar. So perhaps I like to add some visualizations as well. Perhaps if the box plot is my favorite, put it here, and the cross table there. So you can see I now have certainly a custom toolbar with a number of different quick access to a number of different features here. One thing that is also noteworthy is that there is a little menu here where I can reset the toolbar and also copy toolbar IDs to the clipboard. And that leads me to the next topic, which is how can an administrator actually configure the defaults of the custom toolbar for different user groups. So I'm sharing here again the presentation. And as you can see here, the admin can actually define the default configuration of the toolbar per user group using the administration manager. The toolbar defaults are actually captured by a preference, a server preference called toolbar shortcuts. And there are some defined keywords that represent each of the features that you can put in the toolbar. And that's the use of this copy toolbar IDs to clipboard. So for the admin to conveniently set these defaults, he would actually just configure the toolbar himself, and then right-click to select copy toolbar IDs to clipboard and paste that into the preference for the toolbar shortcuts, or the preference called toolbar shortcuts. And this is then, since it's a preference, it works just like any other server preference in Spotfire. You can set it per user group. So some users may have a certain toolbar configuration, other users may have others. Each individual user can then change the toolbar as I demoed initially, and they can change it to their liking. So this toolbar shortcuts preference is just setting the default. Users can then change it, unless the admin disables the license that controls the toolbar shortcut. So if the admin would really like to be able to control the toolbar without having the individual users change it, that's possible too. The admin just needs to set the corresponding licenses in the right way. And then on to the next larger visual analytics feature. This one is also based on a lot of requests on the ID portal related to the ability to see the details of library items better than you could before in the Browse the Library section in the Spotfire 10 Plus menu. So you see here we have the library, and when you can select items in the library, and then you have a new section here that actually shows a lot of detail about them. So even details like the GUID, the date created, the modified by, last modified, the size, and so on. And for particular items, there are also additional detail, like for information links, you can, for example, see which columns that are provided by the information link. So this makes it easier to find the right library item, and also, of course, to find more information about the library items that you're looking for. So I'm actually going to demo that as well. So it's from the plus menu, you can select browse the library, and now it's was already expanded here. But you see, this is what you normally would see. You can select here, and then you can select either open or view details. You can also click there in order to view details, a little icon there. You get to see the thumbnail like that, and you get to see a number of different pieces of information related to the selected library item. And it's also slightly adaptive to the type of the library item, since if you're selecting an information link, you will see slightly different things, or additional things rather. You can also copy this to the clipboard should you need to put it in a document or something. You just click copy, and then you can paste it following that. One thing that you may or may not be aware of is also that since a couple of releases ago, this flyout is expandable, so that you can actually make sure that you actually get enough space to view long paths, for example. So if you do like this, you see that we can't fit the entire file name here. So then what we can do is actually expand it like this to make sure that you see the entire file name. Okay, back to the slides, and then the next feature I wanted to speak about is related to streaming data and the automatic reconnection for streaming data. So what this means is that the Spotfire client, so both the web client and the installed client, will automatically reconnect if the Spotfire data stream servers goes down and then restarts. So this may be that the Spotfire data stream server is intentionally taking down for maintenance or for restarting. And in this case, the Spotfire clients will, of course, show an error message while it's down, but then they will reconnect and start showing the streaming data again once it's once the server is up. And while this is, of course, useful for applications that you use on your own laptop or desktop computer, it's even more so for dashboards that are shown in hallways or in the cafeteria and so on, since those dashboards typically don't have any specific personal user that would refresh reload the data if there is a problem. But now there is no need to do that. They will automatically start working again once the Spotfire data streams server is again up, without anyone having to do anything. The fourth feature here is more flexible drill down. And this is a little bit involved when you have to describe it. And it's actually easier to see what it looks like once it's configured. But for those of you that are into the details with Spotfire, it means that a visualization can now be limited by its own marking. So you may be aware that the visualization may have the data limited by markings. Before, in earlier versions of Spotfire, it was not possible to limit the data of a visualization using the same marking as it actually, as the visualization is configured to use itself. So this means that the visualization can now be both master and details visualization at the same time. And I'm going to jump quickly into a little demo for this as well. And I'm going to start with how it can look like in a already configured dashboard. So here you see, this is a typical Spotfire dashboard, right? You have a map here, so that has different stores in the US. Then you have other bar charts here, so you see the sales per store type. You have some sort of histogram with the sales versus promotion, number of promotions. Sales per city, and then a regular performance matrix there. So this map chart here has been set so that it's configured to be limited by the same marking as I use if I mark in the map. And actually all these three bar charts here, all the three bar charts, they also use the same marking, and they are limited. The data is limited by the same marking. So that means that if I want to look closer here on stores in this region, I can mark those, and since I've configured the map chart to auto zoom to the available data, it also auto zooms exactly to the area that I marked. These visualizations here also changed now, since I marked the data in the map chart, but now I can actually mark, for example, let's say those stores that got the most promotions. And what happens is that the data on the map changes, and the data on the store type, sales per store type, that also changes. So let's say now I want to focus only on the large retailers in the area that are already marked on the map, and those that had the higher promotions, more than 6 promotions, as I've already marked in this bar chart. And now I mark also these large retailers. So that means that we have narrowed down, we have drilled down to a subset of the data based on selections in multiple visualizations. And the performance matrix here, it actually shows all data. So if we temporarily maximize it, we can see that those stores that are marked here, those are the only ones that remain in the selection of all the data that we looked at. And you see the faded ones, that's all the data, all the rest of the data. So to give a little bit of an example of how to actually use that or how to set it up, I'm going to start from scratch here. So we see we have a scatter plot, and we can see that it uses the marked rows. And if we select it to be limited by marked rows, then you see all the data disappears. And that's because nothing is marked at the moment. So we need to change this one as well to, if no items are marked, then we select to show all data. So here we go again. What happens now is that if I mark data here, you see the visualization automatically zooms to the data that I selected. If I unmark by clicking outside the marker, then it unmarks and we again see everything. If I create a new visualization, like let's do a bar chart here, and let's do the sales, and let's actually color by store type. Then when let's say we select all these, let's say the low performing stores here. then we still have all different. Oh, I forgot to set the limit to mark rows for the bar chart. We can then select to look only for data in the Midwest region, and you see that the scatter plot also changes, and if we then select just the large retailers, it changes again. If we want to back up one step now, that I actually want to not only see the large retailers in the Midwest, but I want to see everything in Midwest, just like I had before I selected the red segment, I just used the little undo arrow here, or I could press Control-Z if required. So that's essentially, I think you get the hang of it now. So if we quickly reset, just see one time more what you can use. You can circle the map, you can auto zoom like this. Perhaps you want to start over. Let's look at California instead, and then only at those that actually receive more than 9 promotions. And you see that all the visualizations dynamically changing. And now let's look only at stores that are of type other. And then there are only a few left here. So very handy and very flexible if you want to create dynamic applications that lets the user drill down based on several visualizations. Then moving on to the geoanalytics features. We now have implemented the ability in Spotfire to automatically position feature labels on the geometries center. Before, and this is even if the shapefile actually misses the X center or Y center coordinates. That happens sometimes, especially if you are visualizing features that are coming from external data sources, like perhaps the Oracle SQL Server or Postgres databases that have some spatial features. And if the data there misses the X center or Y center, then you couldn't label the shape before. Now Spotfire actually calculates these coordinates automatically and positions the label correctly on the feature. So that's a usability improvement, especially for those customers that are using the spatial features of Oracle or SQL Server or Postgres. Spotfire 10.8 also implements the ability to generate the coordinate reference systems from shapefiles or geotiffs in case it doesn't have the EPSG code. So EPSG is a standard way of expressing which coordinate reference system that is actually used. And sometimes shapefiles and geotiffs miss that information, and then it was not possible to display them in Spotfire before. But what Spotfire does now is that it reads the definition, the projection definition in the shapefile or the geotiff files, and then generates a coordinate reference system that works for this shapefile. So you see how it's displayed here in the dialog. You see that it says imported coordinate reference system. It's a generated CRS, and that means that for the shapefile or geotiff file that was imported, we actually have created its own coordinate reference system for that file. If that GeoTIFF or shapefile is later removed from the analysis, the imported coordinate reference system will also be removed at that point. Finally, on the geoanalytics side, there has been improvement in the web authoring client, Spotfire Business Author, in the sense that we can now add image layers in the Business Author as well. So it's further strengthens the web authoring capability in Spotfire. So that's the visual analytics news, and we have one feature in the advanced analytics side, which is the Python tools dialog. So you may know that in Spotfire 10.7, we introduced the ability to do Python data functions natively in Spotfire Analyst. In order to install Python packages, then you needed to use the PIP mechanism in Python. So you needed to do a command line, write a short command line string in order to install the Python package you need. This is now made a bit easier in the sense that you can bring up this from the tools menu. You can bring up the Python tools dialog, and then you can search for the available packages. You can select, install, you can remove installed packages, and so on. So you don't need to use the command line for doing this. So that makes it a little bit easier to manage which packages you have available in your Python installation in Spotfire. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Thomas Blomberg, who's going to cover the data wrangling part. So I'm stopping to share now, and Thomas, please take over.
Thank you, Niklas. Let me share my screen. All right, let's look at the new features in data wrangling and data access in Spotfire 10.8. So first off, we have a smarter add rows recommendation engine, and it's made smarter because we now can base the recommendations not only on metadata, but also on data. And they have enabled Spotfire to load new data in parallel and in the background. So we can actually load metadata and then metadata for a few seconds while you work with Spotfire. So while the new data is added, we can feed some of that data to the recommendation engine. And if there are matches in the add rows recommendation engine, they can be displayed in the flyout and in the summary view. So this is of course also useful for larger data sets when you do a lot of data wrangling as part of adding the data to your analysis file, because if you do a lot of data wrangling while we keep loading data in the background, the user experience will be that the new data was added quite quickly. It's also a really good foundation to have for future functionality when it comes to speeding up the data loading process. So really happy to see this feature being added in 10.8, and I'm really excited for what we can do with background parallel data loading in future versions of Spotfire. We also received feedback from customers that the progress dialog needed some work. Customers were asking for more details, being able to do more analytics of what is taking time when I load data, when I open analysis files. So as part of the recommendation engine work and the parallel background data loading work, we also modernized the progress dialog, which you can see here. And it makes it really easy to see basically what you're waiting for. While I'm sitting here waiting for data to load, what's happening? Is it a slow data source? Is it a huge join that's being executed? And so on. So you can easily see it in real time in the dialog, or you can copy the result when it's finished and then just paste it into the Spotfire analysis file. So you can use Spotfire and Visual Data Analytics to actually analyze your data loading performance in your dashboards. So great feature to have. and it's available in 10.8. A small but very useful feature. We see many customers moving from information links to data connectors and data connections. And now you can use in-memory data connections in combination with data transformations. You can basically add your data transformations to your data connections. And this is when you use them as in-memory data connections, because most of the connectors, of course, support push-down queries and in database, but data transformations today doesn't support that. So this is for in-memory use case when you use connectors to extract data from data sources. And a common use case for having transformation as part of the data source is to reduce the size of analysis files in the library. So when you use the ability to store transformations in the source together with transformations that reduce the number of rows, the end result is a smaller DXP and reduced size in the library. All right, moving over to data access, and we have doing quite some work in the Oracle MySQL connector. You may remember that we moved from an ediyor.net driver to ODBC recently. And now we have taken the next step of adding support for TLS. So we can have certificate files being used together with Oracle MySQL. And we have verified not only that, but also connectivity to a range of cloud data sources. Because TLS is something you really need and want when you're accessing data on cloud, because you don't want to send your data and receive your data over a public internet connection. So TLS is mandatory, and now we have that, which means we were able to test and verify that Amazon Aurora MySQL works, Amazon RDS MySQL also works, and 2 new data sources from Microsoft, Azure Database for MariaDB and MySQL. So really great to be able to push queries into these cloud data sources. We're also continuing to enhance and improve and maintain the SAP BW connector. It's very popular. Our largest customers are using a lot of BW, and they really like the BW connector. And they use it both for push-down queries, but also for extracting data out of BW for further analysis in Spotfire. And the latest iteration of BW is SAP BW for HANA and the 2.0 version. So that's now officially supported. It's the same connector that you use, but we had to do a few small tweaks to it to make sure it works with BW for HANA, and that's now available. Same thing with SAP HANA, also really popular, and we had a small but frequently asked request of adding support for binning. And of course, if you're used to in-memory data and other connectors, you know that you can use the x-axis in visualizations and use and apply auto binning on numerical columns. So now you can do that in database by pushing that as part of the query to HANA. All right, that's the news from the data wrangling and data access side. And with that, over to Miguel to see what's new on the Spotfire server.
Thanks, Thomas. Let's see if I can share the screen now. Yeah, here we are. So let's see what's new in Spotfire Server 10.8. As part of our current work to increase product robustness and simplify product upgrades, the Spotfire Server provides now seamless session failover. That means that now in a Spotfire server cluster, any server can be taken down and all currently connected users through that server can seamlessly continue the sessions on another server without authentication. And of course, they can continue the running analysis sessions in the web player without losing their current state. And this is clearly extremely useful as part of any upgrade process or scaling operation. Also, within the Simplified Upgrades initiative, we have introduced several improvements to the grade tool, which now preserves common Java configuration properties on the grade detects unsupported data versions and incompatible driver versions, and also implements a trusted store that supports multiple trusted stores. This is tricky because this is the way to facilitate the transfer during the upgrades. Spotfire already supported OpenID Connect. This means that Spotfire can verify the identity of the end user based on the authentication performed by an external third-party authorization server. But now, in Spotfire Server 10.8, we have added support for initiating OpenID Connect login to Spotfire from a third-party identity provider. For example, Google, Azure AD, etc. So note that difference, subtle difference between verify by or initiate from. This is an optional feature within the OpenID Connect specs, but we know that it will simplify authentication flows in many of our customers. And that's all for the server. Now let's go back to Niklas.
Thank you, Miguel. And if you stop sharing, yeah, thank you. And then let's just conclude with what's new for Spotfire Developer. And essentially, these are APIs that relates to the features that has been added. So like the API to defining custom map chart projections, the API for the feature with the transformation of the data sources that Thomas described, and then the API to set the legacy limit by marking behavior. So that's related to the flexible drill down feature that I demoed initially. And in order to make it possible to have exactly the old behavior of Spotfire, if there are applications that require that, there is also API support to set this legacy limit by marking behavior. And with that, we conclude this presentation about what's new in Spotfire 10.8. And just as a summary, Spotfire 10.8 provided actually quite a lot of small but useful features, such as the more flexible drill down, customizable toolbar, the details of library items, and the automatic reconnect for streaming data. Also the Python tools, the smarter loading of new data into the analysis, and the seamless session failover in the data wrangling and administration areas. Thank you.